All right, this video is volume, but of cross sections. This is a continuation of 7.2 for calculus, okay? So cross sections, we talked about the example of the museum in Paris called the Louvre, where the roof is its own triangle, okay? So this is creating a shape that has, the flat ground, and then you have some sort of a 3D roof to it, okay? So when these questions are asked, they will give you one or two functions like we did in the regular volume, the rotating, okay? If there's only one function, then you don't have to worry about subtracting anything from it, okay? You use the x-axis. A and B, my first and last point, are still found the same way. Either they'll give it to you or you set them equal to each other to find where they intersect, okay? Then they have to tell you what the shape of the roof is. Okay, so depending on the shape of the roof, you will have a square will use this formula, a semicircle will use this, and so on with these names and these purple underlines. Okay, so for example, the integral of the area of a base, a square, the area of a squared is the side squared. Okay, so for that reason, the side, if I were to lay a square on these two graphs as my roof, the side of one of those squared would be the distance from F to G. So that's why we pick F minus G as that side. Every single floor of these buildings that we're putting roofs to will be F minus G. Okay. So now if I look at the semicircle, semicircle is half pi r squared. If I want to get a radius from here and then build a roof of a semicircle, radius would be half of F minus G. So in the place of R, I put half of F minus G, I square it, and then I can put my pi over 2 on the outside. Now to make my formula a little cleaner, 2 squared is 4, 4 times 2 is 8. Now all my formulas can have the same integral, it's just the coefficient that's changing. Okay? So equilateral triangle, the area of that is radical 3 over 4 times the side squared. Again, that side is just F minus G. Okay, so that's the only part that changes here. Isosceles right triangles can be seen two ways. We could either put the leg as my F minus G, or I can put the hypotenuse as my F minus G. Okay, so area of a triangle is half times base times height. So if the base and the height are the same, I can just square these two and bring the half outside. So either the base and the height are both F minus G. That's why I got squared. Okay. Now, if it's on the hypotenuse, you have to do a little work to be able to solve what this leg would be in terms of F minus G. And that's what you would plug in. But it does clean out to 1 over 4 times the integral of F minus G squared. And now this one is very rare, so if you're taking the AP test, don't stress too much about this one or the last one I'm going to show you. These last two are very rare. The ones above this image are the most common ones. So if I were to put the diagonal going across as my floor, I would use this formula, okay, which cleans out to 1/2 times integral of F minus G. Again, especially for those of you taking an AP test this year or the upcoming years, I'd encourage you just to memorize the name of the shape of the cross section with the cleanest form, okay? All of these have a squared except for this last one that I'm going to show you, okay? This is if I'm working with a rectangle, which is base times height. Every rectangle, depending on what's given, has a different height, which is why this one coefficient is just whatever number they give you as the height, and this one does not have a squared. So again, all the others have squares and a numerical coefficient. This is the only one that does not have a square, and they have to give you the coefficient. Okay? So again, make sure you memorize the name of the shape with what was underlined in purple. All right, so here's our first question. It says, find the volume bounded. So first word I see there that's a key is volume. By f of x and g of x, there's my two functions. I will take a minute to rewrite those because even though they're to the first power, they're written a little ugly. And also they're giving you x equals 0. With cross sections, so now I know I'm doing a cross section, and equilateral triangles. Which is the formula for cross section of equilateral triangles? Radical 3. Good. Integral from a to b of f minus g squared, and then either dx or dy, whatever terms it is, okay? So now, I'm going to fix my f and g of x. I'm going to say that f of x, I'm going to move the one with the variable to the front, negative half x plus 1, and I'm going to say g is a positive half x minus 1. I just moved these terms to the front and these to the back, and instead of saying x over 2, I said half of x. Okay? Now, they don't give me my full a and b, so let's solve for them. So if I subtract this over it, I'd have a negative x equals, if I move that over, I get, what is it, negative 2? Yeah. X equals 2. Okay? So these will intersect at x equals 2. If you like the visual, this is a very easy graph to draw. Okay? F of x has a y-intercept of 1 and a negative slope with a rise over run of 1 over 2. So I go down 1 and I go over 2. Okay? I'll connect those two. And then g has a y-intercept of negative 1 and a positive slope of rise 1 and run 2. Okay? And then they also wanted me to close it off with x equals 0. Okay? So this is my floor. Okay? This was f of x, and this one is g of x. So we only found one point of intersection, but the question told us to bound it also by x equals 0, which is this left side. Okay, so that means my A is 0, and my B is this 2. Sorry for the bell. So now let's start filling in what we know. We're going to use this coefficient of square root of 3 over 4 times the integral. My A is 0, and my B is 2. Of f minus g, don't necessarily trust the variables they give you here. It is a top minus bottom like area. Who's on the top? The f of x, right? So negative half x plus 1 minus, be very careful here to make sure that you put parentheses, g of x. And then all of that, once you clean up that inside, will get squared. Okay, so we do have a little bit of algebra and cleaning up to do. Make sure, according to PEMDAS, you do the inside of the parentheses first. So you subtract first, and then you do the exponent. Okay, so if I distribute here, so I have negative half x plus 1 minus half x plus 1. That is what I'm going to end up squaring. So I have negative x plus 2. Okay. And I'm still not done with my algebra because life's going to get a lot easier in the calculus section if I FOIL that first. Okay. So foiling that gives me a negative x plus 2 times a negative x plus 2. Okay. Everybody following? So I have x squared minus 2x plus 4. Now this is what I'm integrating. So this section is very heavy in algebra, okay? So be careful. Antiderivative of x squared. Antiderivative of negative 4x. Good. And antiderivative of positive 4. Nice. So, big mistake that happens every year is people get to here and they do the correct f of b minus f of a, but where would my mistake be? Not bringing down that coefficient. Okay? You don't have to write that minus 0 part. I like doing it as a good habit, making sure I don't forget anything. But that right there would be your final answer. Okay. That is your FRQ answer. So our next question says find the volume bounded by f of x and the x-axis. What does the x-axis mean? 0. Y equals 0. Okay, so they really gave you the second one right there. And then it says with cross sections, so I know it's volume cross sections, of semicircles. What is the formula for semicircle? Good. Pi over 8 from A to B of f minus g squared. Remember, guys, what you're really just memorizing is coefficients. Okay? All right. So, for those of you who like to do it without the graph, they did not give me an A and B. So, what do I have to do first? Right. So, I have to say that f of x, which is 2 sine of x, equals my second function, which is 0. That 2 will divide out, and then I'm still just talking about sine of x equaling 0. If you know your unit circle, when does sine equal 0? 0, pi, and 2 pi, right? 2 pi is me coming back, okay? So what I really just care about is from 0 to pi, because 2 pi counts as like 0, okay? Now, if you're more of the visual, we know that sine goes over, then under, okay? So we really only care about that first portion, the portion that goes above, okay? So it goes over like this, okay? Where this is pi, and this is 0. Now that 2 in front of the sign just makes it stretch to 2, but that won't affect us right now. The calculus will find that work out for me, okay? So now, I have pi over 8 times my integral. Who's my a? 0. And my b is pi of f minus g. So I have 2 sine of x minus g is 0 squared. So this minus 0 is irrelevant. Anything minus 0 is just itself. What does 2 sine of x squared give me? Nice. 4 sine squared of x. Now, I don't know about you, but I like taking my coefficients out to the front. So I'm going to take this 4 out to the front, and it's going to become 4 pi over 8. Remember, I'm allowed to do that with coefficients. And 4 pi over 8 reduces to pi over 2. Now I'm doing the integral from 0 to pi of sine of x. And remember, I've trained you when trig functions are squared, put that square on the outside. Okay? Now, we're going to treat this as a calculator question. Okay? These do exist on the AP. They're wonderful. You do not have a rule right now for this one. This is a rule you would technically learn like in BC. Okay? So, because I'm going to use my calculator and I'm probably going to truncate my answers, I'm going to put an approximation symbol. I'm going to use my calculator. Take a moment and plug that into your calculator. So, for these questions, we're going to go to our calculator. If it is a calculator question in AP, feel free to plug it in straight from your first step. And you can see that here, parentheses by parentheses on mine. And you get an approximation of 2.467. And it's volume, so whatever units they give you, it'd be units cubed. Okay?